The Sunday school lesson for November 17th, 2024 is a song of thanksgiving, Psalm 100. Welcome, viewers and subscribers, to my channel, Read With Me. I am Audrey. If you are new here, please know that this is an audio reading of the lesson with intermittent commentary. Verses 1 through 3. A psalm for giving grateful praise. Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. Know that the Lord is God. It is he who made us, and we are his. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. The single Hebrew word here, translated with the phrase shout for joy, occurs 28 times in the book of Psalms. 4 of those instances involve making such noise to the Lord. The oldest English translation, that of the Wycliffe Bible of AD 1395, challenged the reader to sing ye heartily to God. The same verb is used for the shout at the siege of Jericho. The call to shout with joy and worship speaks to the high enthusiasm and excitement that should surround the praises of the faithful community. All the earth translates a Hebrew phrase that appears 17 times in the Psalter. In 15 of those instances, the translation is all the earth or the whole earth, and that is the sense here. Even so, some students think that the text calls the faithful of Israel, wherever they may be, to prayer and praise. This interpretation is supported by many texts that call Israel to faithful worship of the Lord. And the focus might be on Israelites who were forced to migrate to many lands and about whom the prophets were concerned. This cannot be proven, however, as no date or author is given for the psalm. Another interpretation is that the challenge to prayer and praise is for Jew and Gentile alike, anywhere in the world. Like Psalms 148 through 150, this understanding of the text expects that not just Israelites will join in praising God, but all human beings. How will this occur? The psalm does not spell out how Gentiles should know about God's mercy and kindness, although the gospel message will clarify this later. The idea that Gentiles will come to know about Israel's God is a repeated theme of the Old Testament. For example, Abraham's family was to be a blessing to all peoples on earth. The prophet Isaiah drew on this idea, as did other prophets. A third possibility is that the writer might have embraced intentionally the ambiguity of whether he was speaking to Israel as dispersed in the world or to both Israelites and Gentiles everywhere. Certainly, the psalm eventually came to have the bigger vision. All human beings may join in the worship of God in the full knowledge that God welcomes all into a deep relationship. In verse 2a, with gladness, the invitation comes with certain expectations. The first is that worshiping the Lord can't be separated from serving Him. The deity served is the deity worshiped, and vice versa. Another expectation concerns the attitude or motivation that people bring to that privilege. We do not serve God primarily out of fear of violating His rules, nor do we serve as those who merely tick off boxes as a matter of ritual or for personal gain. Either approach assumes that our good works will justify us in God's eyes. Rather, we serve with gladness, a word translated joy elsewhere. This approach dispels worry and allows for simple trust in God's mercy. The word translated gladness occurs 14 times in the book of Psalms, where it is also translated joy. This sense of joy occurs in individuals and in the community. The life of worship and service should be filled with joy whenever possible and deeply honest when it is not. While not under consideration in this psalm, it is important to recognize that Israel used laments to help them express the disorientation and pain they experienced. Asserting that we are to serve and worship the Lord with gladness is not an exclusive call to speak only happily to God. He has made room for all our experiences, as we see most clearly in the incarnation of Jesus. In 2b, the invitation to come here and in Psalm 104 below is similar to Psalm 95, verse 2 and verse 6. Singing is mentioned more than 130 times in the Psalter, and joy takes concrete form as the community assembles in doing so. The psalm invites those hearing it to take delight in both God's merciful work and their fellow human beings' celebration of that work. Ancient singing normally was accompanied by musical instruments, including string lyres or harps, wind instruments such as pipes, flutes, or ocarinas, and percussion instruments such as drums or shakers. The talents of the people come together to express their pleasure in God's goodness. We see a similar embrace of creativity in service to God in his calling of Bezalel and Oholiab to make artistic designs for work in gold, silver, and bronze. We do well to consider how we too are allowing our skilled artisans to lead us into the worship of our creative God. In 3a, we know we now come to the beating heart of Psalm 100. Here is the first key idea of the verse: the Lord, the God of Israel, who rescued the people from Egyptian bondage, gave them the promised land, and sustained them repeatedly in times of crisis, is the one and only true God. Other gods do not merit the name. Since the psalm probably addresses the whole world and not just Israel alone, the confession that the Lord is God is to be offered by all human beings, or, in other words, the evidence of God's deity as revealed in the Exodus and other miraculous events of Israel's history also extends to non Israelites, Gentiles. This idea also appears in, for example, Psalms 46:10 and 83:18. The main idea of the psalm is the call to know God. Human knowledge of God is always limited and entirely dependent on God's self revelation. We can know only what God has equipped us to know. And the main thing we know is God's mercy to human beings. By calling Abraham and his descendants to be a people, God was forming a people who could be an example of the possibilities of righteousness and mercy for all human beings. The psalm invites its Jewish singers and all who overhear them to experience confidence in God's willingness to be with the reader in a deep relationship. Peoplehood is worth celebrating. Knowing God is an important way the New Testament talks about the experience of being a Christian. The Gospel of John, in particular, speaks of evidence as it relates to coming to the knowledge of the deity of Christ. What we can know, we know through the revelation of the Son. This idea does not appear in this form in the Old Testament, of course, yet its core ingredients do. In 3b, the second idea, or rather confession, is that the Lord's status as the unique God means that he is the creator. Ancient religions sometimes thought of the creator as a retired deity, the ancestor of the current leader of the lowercase g of their pantheons. For the Bible, there is only one God, and so God must be the creator. In 3c, the phrase, not we ourselves, found in the King James Version, is one possible reading, but there is uncertainty in the Hebrew text. The word no in Hebrew is identical in sound to the word for him. This second possibility yields the truth that we did not make ourselves, having no godly power to do so. Saying so implies God's continued power over us and our relative powerlessness in the face of the Lord who formed us. The phrase, we are his people, implies a shared history and hope for the future, a deep relationship marked by prayer and service. The last part of the verse restates and deepens that idea. Shepherd was a royal title, with God being the heavenly king who cares for human beings. While the image of Israel as flock can be negative connotations, the sheep for the slaughter, etc., it more ordinarily has a positive meaning. The image may be one of mutual love and desire for relationship. Even the negative uses are such because they hope for a positive relationship that does not seem available at the moment. Verses 4 through 5. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name. For the Lord is good, and his love endures forever. His faithfulness continues through all generations. In 4a, this psalm was to be sung in the temple as part of congregational worship. Gates and courts together formed the part of the temple precinct to which the congregation had access. The temple centered on the Holy of Holies, which only the high priest could enter once a year in order to offer a sacrifice for atonement. A court outside of this was open to priests, another outside that to men of Israel, and the courts on the outside perimeter were available to women and Gentiles. Because a large group was being called to praise, this psalm probably was sung at a major holiday when Israelites had a pilgrimage from the countryside and gathered at the temple in Jerusalem. Some scholars have connected this song to the Festival of Tabernacles, but without great certainty. In the 3rd century AD, the collection of Jewish law, called the Mishnah, reported the tradition that the priests in the temple sang Psalm 94 on Wednesdays and Psalm 93 on Fridays. So it is possible that Psalm 100 also figured in daily rituals, but this is also very uncertain. There are not enough specific clues in Psalm 93 through 100 to answer the question confidently. What is more certain is that the psalm envisions a congregation singing it inside the temple courts, as do Psalms 24, 7 through 10, 120 through 134, 149 through 150. These speak of processions, dancing, and crowds preparing themselves for worship together. Psalm 100 also excludes usage during a day of fasting or remorse. Such an observance would require a different sort of psalm. In 4b, to thank God means to give him all proper due. The congregation should praise God and elevate his name above all others. The congregation should revere God and treasure the opportunity to be in his presence. Worship, then, is not primarily a moment for inspiring people, but a time for connecting people to God as it brings to memory our deep dependence on God's love. The psalm ends with closely connected reasons for human praise. The statement that the Lord is good is no mere cliche, for many ancient deities were far from good. The notice of God's goodness appears frequently in the book of Psalms, often as a reason for praise and confidence in the possibilities of a good life. But how can God's goodness be proven? His love is seen in example after example of repeated acts of healing, forgiving, and rescuing Israel from oppressors. That merciful goodness has appeared again and again in Israel's history as Psalms reciting God's deeds show. God's goodness appears in the permanent nature of his trustworthiness. God's promises and actions are reliable because of his faithfulness, providing an unfailing guide to human happiness. Because God's faithfulness endures through all generations, Psalm 100 points to the future. The countless experiences of the people with God illustrate divine faithfulness. The people's worship should recall those experiences. It should also express their confidence that such faithfulness awaits their descendants. Hope is baked into the worshiping congregation's understanding of reality and its behaviors. Thank you so very much for listening. Join me soon for the next reading, the audio reading of the Sunday school lesson with intermittent commentary. And remember, every Sunday at 1 o'clock Central Standard Time, I release a new audio for the upcoming Sunday school lesson. Please remember to share this video, and if you have not subscribed, do so. Thank you so much for all that you do to help this channel grow one viewer and one subscriber at a time.